Good morning friends. General Science Class 8 Chapter 9 Disaster Management Part 1 What is disaster? Friends, today in this part we see what is disaster, types of disaster, effects of disaster, disaster management and objectives of disaster management. This part is very useful for the complete study of Chapter 10 Disaster Management, Class 10 Science and Technology, Part 2. Friends, many incidents happens in our day-to-day life. Some of these incidents are joyful and some of them are very painful. Disasters disturb human life. Environment is also damaged due to various disasters. Many disasters causes sudden change in environment. These incidents are called as disasters. Then what is disaster? The suddenly arising any natural or man-made calamity is called as disaster. The United Nations has defined disaster as the sudden event that leads to huge loss of life and property is called as disaster. Disaster causes huge loss of life and property. The life in the area of disaster disturbs totally. The disaster leads to the huge loss of roads, railway routes, government buildings, houses and food grains. Floods, cyclone, wet and dry famine, earthquakes, volcanoes, forest fires and wars are some examples of disasters. Friends, now we see types of disasters. Types of disasters. There are two main types of disasters. These are number 1 natural disasters and number 2 man-made disasters. A natural event such as flood or earthquake that causes great damage of life and property is called as natural disasters. Floods, cyclones, famine, volcanoes, earthquakes, forest fire, epidemic diseases like corona and landslides means reef collapse are some examples of natural disasters. A man-made event such as bomb blast or fires which are operated manually or by accidentally that causes huge loss of life and property is called as man-made disasters. Wars, accidents, bomb blasts, fire and terrorist attack are examples of man-made disasters. Disasters can be classified as given below depending upon various criteria. Students must be study the given classification carefully. Friends, now we see effects of disasters. Effects of disasters. Friends, we cannot avoid disasters, but we can decrease the effects of disasters by taking some precautions. Disasters cannot be predicted. Disasters affect various areas of life like economic, social, cultural, political, environmental, law and administration. The effects of some disasters are remain for short time, while the effects of some disasters are remains for long period. Friends, reasons behind every disasters are also different. Collapsing of houses, collapsing of bridges, flooding of coastal villages, shortage of food are some problem of flood. Collapsing of houses, developing cracks in the land are from effects of earthquake. Disasters like forest fire and drought also adversely affects the environment. Disasters definitely affect the economy of nation because huge expense takes place on the reconstruction of roads, bridges and government buildings. All the concerned departments are affected by disaster and thereby entire system collapses. Now let's see nature and scope of disaster. Nature and scope of disaster. Taking into consideration the scope of disaster, some of the important facts must be thought over. These are as follows. Number 1, pre-disaster phase. Number 2, warning phase. Number 3, emergency phase. Number 4, rehabilitation phase. Number 5, recovery phase. Number 6, reconstruction phase. Taking into consideration the nature and scope of disaster, only three aspects of disaster are important for common citizens. These are number 1, phase of emergency. In this phase, it is important that maximum lives can be saved by quick action. Various actions like search and rescue operations, medical help, first aid, removing the people from affected area are expected in this phase. Number 2, transitional phase. Rehabilitation work is started in this phase. After the subsidence of disaster, it includes clearing of debris, restoring water supply, restoring power supply and repairing the roads so that it will be help to bring normalcy in public life. Number 3, reconstruction phase. This phase begins in the transition phase. Reconstruction work mainly starts in this phase. Farming practices and routine work are started in this phase. Disaster management. Friends, now first we see what is disaster management. Friends, disaster is a very fast process. In fact, it is an accident. Disasters may be minor or major. To overcome the disaster, effective management is necessary. Let's see the definition of disaster management. Disaster management is either prevention of disaster or making arrangement to face it or at least achieve the abilities to face it. Friends, now we see the objectives of disaster management. Objectives of disaster management. Number 1, to release the people from calamity. Number 2, to reduce the effect of disaster by supplying essential commodities to the people. Number 3, to restore the human life in the region by creating reconciliation process. Number 4, rehabilitation of disaster victims. Number 5, considering protective measure in disaster. Such disaster will not reach in future or to reduce its intensity. Friends, disaster management includes two main stages. These are number 1, pre-disaster management and number 2, post-disaster management. Now let's see these important stages one by one. Number 1, pre-disaster management. Pre-disaster management includes following things. Number 1, identifying the pro-disaster areas. Number 2, collecting the information about intensity of disaster and probable sites of disasters through predictive intensity maps and hazard maps respectively. Number 3. Getting special training for disaster management. Number 4. Increasing awareness about the disaster management to the people through television, mobile, and mass media like newspapers. Number 2. Post-disaster management. Post-disaster management includes following things. Number 1. Providing all types of help to the victims of disasters. Number 2. Participation of local peoples saved from the disaster in arranging the help to the victims. Number 3. Quick establishment of help centers and control centers for the victims. Number 4. Delivering the help to the victims and continuous review of help by control centers. Number 5. Being always prepared for disaster rescue. Structure of Disaster Management Authority. Disaster Management Act 2005 has been passed in our country for disaster management. In case of disaster, an authority has been established by governments. Let's see all these authorities over the country. Number 1. National Disaster Management Authority has been established at national level. Honorable Prime Minister of our country are chairman of this authority. Number 2. State Disaster Management Authority has been made at state level and Honorable Chief Minister of that state are chairman of this authority. Number 3. District Disaster Management Authority has been established at district level. Respected district collector of that district are chairman of this authority. Number 4. Taluka Disaster Management Authority has been established on Tahsil level. Respected Tahsildar of that taluka are chairman of this authority. Number 5. Village level committee has been established for the disaster management. Respected Sarpanch of that village are chairman of this committee. Friends, we can perform following activity to avoid disasters. Number 1. Don't push each other while using staircase in the school. Number 2. Follow the traffic rules. Look at left and right sides while crossing the road. Number 3. Remind important helpline numbers and use as per need. For example, police 100, firefighting force 101, disaster control unit 108 and ambulance 102. Number 4. Don't touch any suspected objects. Number 5. Do not spread remorse. Number 6. Stay away from inflammable liquids and gases. Thank you very much.